So this is the Gate and Bar podcast, the GAB podcast, and I've roped in some really willing volunteers from the office. And today we're just going to go through how we got into surveying. It's quite an obscure career, really, I think, and how we were introduced to the idea of surveying in the first place, how we got into it education-wise, and our first roles and bits like that, just to give a bit of an insight into, if anyone's thinking about it, how to go about it, and yeah, just a bit of an insight into the start of everyone's career, I guess. So we've got Stephen, Alistair, Rebecca and Ian joining us, and we'll just be going through. I think we've got quite a wide range of experiences. I think nobody's is the same, which is unusual. I think some are more common than others. Yeah, some are slightly odd, but yeah, some are more common than others. So I wanted to start with probably the most common one, and I'm pointing at Alistair, and he's looking really excited about it.
You lost me at volunteer.
Sorry. I'll clarify that they are all employees and they do contractually have to input into this podcast. So I think Alistair's is like the typical route for a surveyor. I think I don't have any stats to back this up, but I think working in the industry, I think it's the most typical. So I'll let the rabbit out the hat. I think knowing someone in the profession, either a family member or family friend, is probably the most common way to get into it, just because, like I said, it is quite obscure. So do you want to just run through your experience? Bit to date, how did you get here? Like, what was your first interaction with building surveying? It'd probably be quite early, I would have thought.
Well, my father is a building surveyor.
Yeah.
So I suppose I've always what a building surveyor is, if I do know what a building surveyor is. It's a very broad church. I got confused by broad church.
Yeah, that confused me. Yeah. So your dad's chartered surveyor. He's been employed and runs his own practice, doesn't he?
Yes. So yeah, I suppose I've always had an interest in buildings, playing with tape measures in the garden, that kind of thing. Those foldy wooden stick things, I've broken several of those. When I was around 16, I used to work during the summer holidays, labouring on building sites, stuff like that. Probably shouldn't mention that, it's probably illegal.
Yeah.
Anyway.
Is that something your dad lined up for you?
It was cash in hand as well.
Sorry, taxman.
I once actually took a week off school to do some
Did you?
strip out. Yeah.
You get fined for that now?
Yeah.
Was this on your family home?
No comment. Yeah, I suppose, like many people doing A-levels, no idea what I wanted to do. And going back to knowing someone, there's a guy who used to work at York College, a guy called Dean Starkey, who used to work for my dad. He's a chartered building surveyor, and he was running the built environment, construction in the built environment course, and just fell into that, really.
So did you go straight from school to college to do that?
Straight from school to college. It was a sort of part-time. It was 3 days a week. And then I was working with my dad for the other 2 days, followed that up with the HND, or C, who knows, course, which was 1 day a week, and then working 4 days, which is sort of where I got a lot more involved in things. Sort of started out as office lackey, CAD monkey, tape measure, staff holder.
They're doing everything that your dad and Dean didn't want to do.
Probably, yeah.
Brilliant.
Yeah, climbing into a hedge to get to the corner of a wall.
Yeah.
All that kind of stuff.
The jobs for Alistair list was quite a long one. Yeah. So you avoided, I think, that well-trodden path between school straight to A-levels.
Yes.
And I assume that's only because your dad knew of another avenue through Dean and through York College.
Yeah, that was it. I think to be perfectly honest, was a bit sick of education at that point, definitely. I think working certainly suited me, having a bit of money, a few beer tokens, definitely appealed. In hindsight, not overly sure if it was the best idea. There's definitely advantages to both routes. Obviously, it's a lot quicker in terms of getting qualified if you go to uni, which I've started doing now. I've got about a year and a half to go on a part-time degree, which I started much later on. What will I been? About 26.
So you're doing your building surveying degree at Leeds Beckett now part-time?
Yes. So. Yeah.
And I think your route is almost as typical as it gets, I would have thought. Yeah, real traditional, sort of knew someone to steer you away from A-levels. Because I think the education system, scheme, schools, aim you towards A-levels as the next step. And there isn't an A-level in building surveying or anything closely related. I might be mistaken.
Definitely. Everything at schools is G'd up towards the next step, which is very much GCSEs, A-levels, university. Yeah. And anything, certainly at the school I went to, some schools are probably better than others. But if you sort of wanted to do something alternate, then they just, I wouldn't say they were interested, they just didn't know how to manage, how to facilitate that. Yeah. So unless you knew someone to get your foot in the door, practically, impossible.
Yeah.
But I think the construction industry is good and getting better at promoting things.
Yeah.
These things. I know a few people that are taking on apprentices. And
I think the apprenticeship wasn't really a thing. We're all roughly the same age. Probably, one of the older ones, but I'll say roughly the same age. I'm at the top end of that. But I don't even think apprenticeships in building surveying were a thing. They were definitely known in more of a hands-on sense in joinery and bits like that. Everyone went and did apprenticeships, but in terms of building surveying and quantity surveying and architecture, it just wasn't a thing. It just didn't. I don't know. I felt like it didn't happen. But
definitely, quantity surveying. Why is that so popular?
Yeah, they're really pushing that at the moment, aren't
they? Everyone's a quantity surveyor. When on my course, sort of go in first day, big auditorium, put your hand up if you're doing whatever course, and
everyone.
There was hardly any. I don't think I saw any hands go up for building surveying, and there's about 200 quantity surveyors. Yeah,
and it happens to when I say, "Oh, I'm a chartered building surveyor," they'll respond with, "Oh, quantity surveyor. I know quantity surveyor." And you're just like, no, different thing. Yeah. But I don't know. Maybe the way that the industry's going is down that route. There's certainly more. Shall I say more jobs as a quantity surveyor?
You say there's a salary component to that. So.
Yeah, I think quantity surveyors do command a higher salary. And if you look at directors in multidisciplinary firms, I'd say more than half of them are QSs. Anyway, we're not here to discuss pros and cons about building surveying and quantity surveying. Maybe another podcast for that. So who should we go for next? So we've got Rebecca and Stephen in the room. Let's go Rebecca, because I think Rebecca's is half and half on a much more traditional path, I guess. Do you want to run through how you... Well-ish, yeah.
Yeah, well, I originally did a history degree, so completely unrelated to building surveying.
So I assume, like we were saying, education pushed you that way. Yeah. It was something you were broadly interested in, quite good at GCSE?
Yeah, fairly. Yeah, I can say that. Did my A-levels, I went to university, did my 3-year degree in history, finished up, got a job in property, working for a local authority.
Was that out of interest or just something you fell in?
It was a bit of both, I think. It sounded interesting. I was quite open to whatever, really. So, I did that. I really, really enjoyed it. And that's probably a few months in is when I learnt about building surveying. My manager at the time and now good friend, she was doing a building surveying degree. I just thought, that sounds interesting. I was working alongside quite a few building surveyors there. So I was shadowing them, and I thought, yeah, I can do that. I can have a go at that.
Doesn't look hard. I'll give that a go. Yeah.
So yeah, I was lucky for my work to sponsor me to do a degree whilst I was working full time. Did that for 2 years part time, and then started working at consultancies.
Yeah. So you've gone from local authority to private consultancy?
Yeah.
And still in private consultancy. You've gone round, I won't say a few, you've only been to a couple, but larger commercial ones, and then you're here, which is, more smaller boutique. Oh, that makes it sound a bit pretentious. Smaller consultancy practice. So yeah, I think your experience is broad in terms of work life, and I don't know, I think fairly traditional in that you've bumped into the role in work, I think. I
did, although construction never seemed like an option for me. I think especially as a woman, it's not really, I don't know, more women are getting into surveying, but it's not really a job that you think about when you're at A-levels or even at university. So,
did it ever cross your mind before that first role where you were actually interacting with building surveyors? Did it ever cross your mind that construction management surveying would ever?
No, it actually didn't.
No.
Wow. But here I am.
So what would you have done if building surveying didn't cross your path? Where do you think you'd...
What if I was still in that property?
Well, or that you didn't decide to take up building surveying? I
did quite like what I was doing, so I could have gone down maybe the block management, property management route. I would have enjoyed that, I think, but I think with building surveying, it's just so varied, and getting out and about, that was a big appeal. Just working with the buildings themselves in more detail.
The technical side of it.
Yeah.
And now you're working through your APC to get chartered, which is sort of the should be the sort of crown on top of building surveying education, shouldn't it? But everyone says it's the start of your career. There's, again, another podcast for another day. But yeah, so I think your roots, I wouldn't say common, but not unusual.
Not completely unusual.
I think going from public sector to private sector is very common in this industry.
Yeah. I think especially in the last few years, I think that there's definitely been it's been more beneficial to be in a consultancy than in local authority. There's obvious benefits for being in local authority, great pension, loads of holiday.
It's just a range of things you can get involved in a consultancy as well that are appealed.
Yeah.
A lot more, whereas I feel like sometimes at local authority you can be pigeonholed a bit.
Yeah. Stay there because that's what you're good at, sort of crack on. Yeah.
It's good for some things, but nice to branch out.
Yeah. No. And, selfishly, there's better salaries to be had in private consultancies, generally.
It always helps, doesn't it?
Always helps. Yeah. We are just in it for the love, but the money helps. Yeah. So, Stephen, you're the last one in the room that hasn't told us anything. Stephen was GAB's first employee, and best
employees.
Longest served,
true.
Which is some accolade, I guess. And I feel slightly ashamed to say that sort of stole you from another industry. So this is your first role as a building surveyor. Mm-hmm. Do you want to give us an insight into what you were doing before, how you found building surveying, why, and just give us a run through.
So I worked in the hospitality sector as a bar manager, restaurant manager, sort of bit of everything really. And then obviously lockdown hit in 2020. Am I right in saying that?
Yeah.
Seems
a long time ago, but I think it was.
2020. So
anyway, whenever lockdown was.
Whenever that was. So obviously all hospitality, majority of it anyway, stopped. And
you were furloughed, weren't you?
I was furloughed, yeah. So the restaurant the bar that I worked in, was it was very small and very there wasn't an outside seating area, all that sort of stuff. So we couldn't operate from another premises or an outside premise or anything. So I was furloughed for about a year basically, which it gave me a lot of time to think about what I wanted to do. I was doing bar work for about 5-6 years before that. But yeah, definitely it sounds a bit selfish, but lockdown definitely helped with that time to think and like reassess my life sort of thing. And do you want the real answer why I
go for it. We'll have the real
why
answer.
I even knew what building surveying was a thing. Obviously, didn't have a clue what a building surveyor was. Didn't know what anything in construction meant or was. You know, couldn't tell you anything. But I was watching MasterChef.
Yeah.
Gym lockdown. And this guy came on. He was like, "I'm a building surveyor, and I really like cooking." So I was like, "Oh, same."
And you went, "I like cooking."
I like cooking too. And so literally just from that, like started Googling what it was. I was looking at like to get into whatever career. I really wanted something that was varied, and you know, bar work, hospitality's got its ups and downs, and you know, one benefit is the social aspect of it. You obviously meet loads of friends, but you just do in hospitality. You just tend to, for me anyway, you do the same thing over and over again.
Do one shift,
and
then
open
reset.
Up, you clean down,
shift.
exactly. And just the nature of my work, of my bar that I managed was. It was very like regular, heavy. You saw the same faces every single day, the same drinks, same thing. You know, there wasn't really much variety. I was really hungry for something that was like completely different. Like each day might be out on site doing something different, or you know, seeing the rest of the country sort of thing. Anyway, so watched MasterChef. Found out what building surveying was based off that on Wikipedia.
I love the RICS just to like think that everyone's insight into building surveying comes from MasterChef.
MasterChef,
of all things. Out of all the hundreds of thousands they spend on advertising, you found it through MasterChef.
Definitely. Yeah. Well, that's what I heard about it, and then obviously started investing. I didn't just sign up for the next, whatever university course.
You didn't sign up for MasterChef?
Signed up for MasterChef, but it didn't happen.
So then what did you do from there? You found out what building surveying was.
Yeah.
What you were furloughed, sat in your ass. What were next steps?
So obviously started researching the role, what it meant, what building surveyors did a bit more, and then something sort of clicked, and I was like, yeah, that's something definitely like what I really, really want to do for the foreseeable future. So I think it was like 4 days later, I just signed up for a postgraduate uni course.
Yeah.
Obviously, but I did go through uni before that, so I was familiar with sort of the process. I was between 2015 and 2018, I did an English Lit undergraduate, which brought me to York, and then ended up staying. So yeah.
So going back to the education bit, I assume English was something that tweaked your fancy at GCSE level, and it was sort of made clear to you that this was a path. You know?
Yeah, it was. It wasn't. It was. I did it English Lit as an undergrad because I did reasonably well of it at A level, and but it was more of a general degree. It wasn't vocational, so I just chose it because you'd think it's applicable to multiple different disciplines. Yeah, exactly. Yeah, and it's like you don't have to commit to anything. You're not going into English literature to be an English literatist or an author or whatever, or a writer. You're doing it you might get to teach, you might do. So it was just a way of almost buying time a little bit, so I could figure out what I actually wanted to do. But yeah, obviously familiar with the sort of university process. So I did sign up for my postgraduate at Northumbria University doing building surveying. And it was distance learning, so obviously part-time, over 2 years, just doing it from home, basically.
And you've just finished it. Does anyone want to know about me? Or just...
Someone say yes.
All right, yes. Okay, yes.
We hear quite a lot about your experience. Sorry, go.
Can we cut that bit out then where everyone dissed me? Right.
Yeah, okay.
Does anyone want to hear about me?
Yeah.
Yeah, please. Yeah.
Really enthusiastic there. I really like that.
So, Nathan, how did you get into surveying?
Oh, I thought you'd never ask, Alistair. I think you've probably picked up on how bitter I am about education. It's because I'm actually not that intelligent. No, it turns out. I struggled at school is probably the nice way of putting it. Didn't get on at school. And... yeah, I don't know. Careers at the time was a pamphlet and a part-time lady that her only career was a careers advisor, which I always think is quite, be led from the people that have done something. I don't know, anyway. And ended up deciding or being told that college was the best thing for me because A-levels I'd probably struggle at. They were probably right. And as soon as you get funneled down the college route, you just think hands-on, bricklaying, joinery, plumbing, electrical, whatever. So I enrolled on I think it was like a mixed trades course, so you get a go at everything and see what sticks. And I don't mean this in a bad way, but at the time, all the thick kids at school, the kids that didn't do very well at school, i.e. me, got funneled into that route to sort of go on, you can go into the world of work. You just have to stick things together. And well, if I had done that now, I probably would be better off, because joiners and brickies are, in high demand and well paid. So who's the fool? Yeah, but I went to the interview at York College, and I'd done slightly better than everyone predicted at GCSE, and scraped a couple of B's and maybe an A. A lot better than anyone predicted. And it was Dean Starkey again who was leading the course, who sort of said, well, why don't you do the course that I run? And at the time it was called Construction and Design and Management or something, BTEC National Diploma, and just did that. And one of the modules was building surveying. Quite enjoyed that. Worked out what a building surveyor was. And then from there, it was fairly typical. I went straight to university from college, did my degree full-time, which probably one of only maybe Ian did a full-time building survey, but I did my full-time building survey degree. Didn't get a sandwich placement, story for another time, and went straight into work after that. I think I was that was it then. I think as soon as I'd gone to uni and figured out that building surveying was a thing, I just followed the path of least resistance and did my APC when I was in employment. And,
And what was your first job, Nathan?
Interesting. First job. So when I came out of uni, when was it? 2013, something like that. Was that right? The job market was a bit iffy still. So I actually joined a consultancy practice doing cavity wall insulation. And when I joined, it was basically a bunch of salespeople who surprisingly didn't know anything about construction. No. So it was very easy for me to go in and sort of make a difference and go, this is a damp-proof course, and we actually need one, and brought a bit of technical aspect to it, and then got a role at a chartered practice to do my APC. So I took what was available in front of me and had fun doing it. It was a good right to get Ian in. So we're joined by Ian. I've worked with Ian now on and off. How long have we known each other?
6-7 years, I think.
6 or 7 years. It seems longer. And I think yours is probably the most unusual route to building surveying, I would have thought. But again, probably not. You've had the longest career outside of building surveying of everyone, because everyone's near enough fallen straight into it. We've spoken to the others about education and how education took them down a certain route, and then the events leading up to how they got into building surveying has been slightly varied. So where you started, where you first knew that a building survey was a thing. I think we've described it as quite an obscure career. So, yeah.
I think I've got a relatively unique background, but it's by no means sort of prescriptive. I think my first encounter with sort of buildings was when I was at junior school, and my father was a surveyor. As I may have said to you, we had this small talk at school about buildings as part of the curriculum, and together with an architect and a couple of local builders, we went around the village, and I think that's one of my first understands appreciation of buildings.
So if we stop there, your father was a building surveyor, or a surveyor?
Yeah.
Chartered?
No.
Surveyor. So your father was a building surveyor who said that Alistair's introduction to the industry was typical, where a family member or a family friend is a surveyor. I'd say that is the most typical route, is that you know someone that is in the field or does that as a career. So you're interested in that you had that introduction early on, and you went, nah, it's not for me.
No, I sort of, my late father was an extremely practical guy, and there wasn't a lot that he couldn't turn his hand sort of to. That sort of after leaving school, I was lucky enough to go to a school that had very close associations with the cathedral at Canterbury, and not being particularly academic, unlike my brother,
So this is something I've touched on, in that how education funnels you down a route. So you weren't particularly academic. Did that mean that you weren't encouraged to pursue further education and something more hands-on and be more suited to your level of intelligence, should I say?
I quite enjoyed sort of history and I suppose the liberal arts as opposed to sciences, but I didn't actually fancy being a history teacher, although that would have been really interesting. Could have been quite a much more. I would imagine now quite a much more demanding job than being a surveyor. I can imagine. But when I left school, I went to have an interview at the Cathedral of Canterbury with a really quite a scary-looking guy called Brian Lamar, who was the clerk of the works. And on the back of that, I was offered a job as an apprentice stonemason and carver. So I did a traditional apprenticeship for 5 years at the cathedral, which is probably where my appreciation of the wider built environment sort of started.
What did your dad think of that? Was that quite an honourable thing for you to do, or was he a bit annoyed that you weren't a surveyor?
You have to remember, I'm a little bit older than you, Nathan. It's one of these things that you got the apprenticeship and then your father still had to sign your apprentice documents. So you had to come in for an interview. And as far as my father was concerned, I think I got a job that was relatively noble.
Yeah.
And I wasn't just, with all due respect, going to be just hanging the same doors for a living.
Was it either get a good job or join the army? Was that your sort
that
of
was very
upbringing?
hotly followed by, that sort of thing. But having worked at Canterbury for 7 years, I was made redundant, and that's what brought me to York. I worked directly for York Minster on a number of high-profile projects, very similar to those at Canterbury.
So Ian tends to play it down, but Ian was quite a good architectural stone carver. There are some pieces on the Minster that Ian's done that are, I can't even comprehend how you'd start looking at something like that, let alone actually make it with your hands and a chisel.
No, I think it's the case that whilst you might produce one particular piece and that's on the bench in front of you, it actually forms part of a wider collective overview of the building. And once your piece is in the building, it very much gets swallowed up by the mass. And it's all about contribution. And that in that case, most people that do work in, say particularly in the stone industry or on cathedrals, it's very much a legacy-based process, coupled with sort of craft training.
How did you get from being a great stonemason, architectural stone carver? I always get in trouble for that. I still don't know the difference, but Ian tells me off. From that to building surveyor, how did you make that from on the tools to an off the tools technical role?
I'm still not quite sure. However, was the sheer amount of patronising lip service that most people at that stage in the crafts and in the workshops were paid. And it just happened to come at a time where I've always had a natural interest in buildings and building architecture, landscapes and design, and that's always sort of been floating around in the background. And I think coupled with, at the time, not particularly seeing eye to eye with...
Can we get rid of this fly? The beautiful stonework that gets done at places like York Minster and Canterbury that you think is the top of anyone's stonemason, stone carving career, relatively underpaid.
Underpaid and undervalued, as I think all of the traditional craft skills in this country are. But it was coupled with the management style at the Minster at the time. A lot of the staff didn't see eye to eye, and there were a huge amount of really talented guys that I worked with just made the decision to leave. But I knew I'd quite like to work with other buildings other than just historic buildings, but hoped that background would lead me perhaps into something in the sort of heritage sector. So I ended up at our old alma mater at Leeds Met Uni doing an HND, and then on, as you did, to the BSc Building Surveying course. As Alistair's doing. It was full-time, and I worked during the vacation times for a really good firm in York called Wiles and Maguire, who were a building conservation architect, and that was really good in just breaking down how to look at buildings, all sorts of different types of buildings, mainly listed or older structures. But it gave me my first real insight working with a girl called Lucy Stewart and a chap called Robert Mortimer into how to sort of look and try and appreciate buildings. Bob Mortimer, indeed, he was just as funny. It's also where I found my Porsche putting the feet up on the desk was from Robert, and having good lunches.
Just to clarify, we all work very hard in the office and don't put our feet up on the desk, apart from Ian.
Intentionally bought desks that are quite uncomfortable to put your feet on.
Yeah, I don't disagree with you, and it's extreme slacking.
Career from there, so you finished your degree at Wiles Maguire?
I did. I went to work for a relatively new organisation called the Auckland Castle Trust at Bishop Auckland, which was set up by a very wealthy Christian philanthropist, and he was taking on the former estate of the Bishop of Durham as part of the breakup of the diocese. And that was to essentially bring all their extant estate back up into repair, which was a huge job.
Yeah.
Bit like rabbit in the headlights, if I'm honest.
Dropped into it.
Very much so, but was very much supported by a couple of other surveyors from local firms who got an understanding of the building. So it was another learning curve.
Interesting that it's a fairly typical route, I think. You've found building surveying, you did your degree full time, you went into a well-established practice to sort of put it into practice in a role. But you've had this whole other career beforehand on the tools. And then even your experience from getting into building surveying has been fairly widespread in terms of your range of what you looked at. You've been a damp and timber specialist, a historic building specialist. So I think that probably gives a bit of I think that's quite a wide-ranging experience in terms of getting into building surveying. I think some more unusual, Ian, and some more typical, probably Alistair, and then everyone in between, I think. We'll wrap up here. Thank you again, everyone around the table, for adding in. So I hope that gives you a bit of an insight. If it was mildly interesting or you want to know a bit more about building surveying, how to get into it, then please leave a comment, send us an email, get in contact. I'll see you for the next one. Banging.